I'm Dennis Anderson along with Julie Zenner, and here's what's coming up on Almanac North.
DFL candidate for the 8th District congressional seat, Michelle Lee, is here. She's hoping to top 4 other Democrats running in the August primary.
We will hear from a Hibbing veteran who shared his story for our Voices of Vietnam series.
And we'll have the latest on the Husky energy explosion investigation and the rest of the business news.
These stories and more coming up now on Almanac North. Well, hello once again and welcome to Almanac North. Thank you very much for watching. And Julie, the Minnesota primary election just a week and a half away.
It seems to be really heating up. You can see a lot of ads on TV,
Yep.
and lots of people are out knocking on doors.
August 14th. All right, thank you. We have another candidate who's joining us tonight.
That's right, we do. Our first guest is a familiar face to television viewers in our region. Following retirement from a successful TV news career, she's taking to the political stage and running for Congress in Minnesota's 8th District. Joining us now is Michelle Lee, who is hoping to win the August 14th DFL primary election. And Michelle, thanks for being here tonight.
Well, thank you, Julie. And Denny, I think this is the first time you and I have ever been together live
in all these years.
I know, you were my stiffest competition.
Well, now you've got some other competition going.
I certainly do, and I am running to beat the band. I'll tell you what, 3 parades every weekend, and I literally run along the parade route.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so
now
running hard.
You're running as a progressive Democrat.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean to you?
Well, what it means to me is making sure that the little guy and the little woman gets its due, gets their due, because I think that there is a whole group of people out there that have been ignored through this whole process. And that's the working poor and the middle class who feels that they are being reduced and they're really struggling just to make ends meet. And I am going out and I'm listening to their stories, but more importantly, we're having conversations about the issues that are important to them. Mm-hmm. And as a journalist, that's what I did for over 35 years. I went out and I listened to people and I took their stories and I crafted reports and brought that to the viewing audience, and from that, solutions were found.
Mm-hmm. Now, was this something that you always wanted to do? I think a lot of people were surprised when you turned to politics after you left the news chair. What was the catalyst for it?
What was the catalyst? I would have to say President Donald Trump. Mm-hmm. The night that the president was elected, I was sitting on the anchor desk, and during a commercial break, we had a political expert on set with me, and this was well before the networks even called the race, and she leaned over in a commercial break and she said, "Michelle, Donald Trump is going to be our next president." And I felt like I'd been kicked in the gut as a good Democrat, although as a journalist I couldn't respond or react to that because I feel very strong about journalistic ethics, and so I held my tongue. And because I knew what was coming down the road, because we had seen throughout his campaign the mean and divisive things that he was saying, and I feared for my country. I also feared for the people of the 8th District. The first thing I did after retirement at the end of 2016, I made a lot of calls and said, I hear there's something called a Women's March in Washington and I want to be on a bus. And I found a ticket, got on that bus. 24 hours later, we were in Washington, D.C., and I was standing in our nation's capital with men and women, 1 million strong, and it felt so good to stand up and say, you know, we still have a voice.
And Michelle, you mentioned that you're hearing a lot of people talk about a variety of issues here in the Northland. One of them certainly is health care. What would you like to see done for health care? Do you want to see any changes? What do you think needs to be done?
Single payer universal health care. And what I mean by that is an enclosed system everyone has to be in. whether you have a pre-existing condition or whether you, it's something that makes sense to me. And when I look back during President Clinton's era, his wife, Hillary, was attempting to bring that to fruition. Had we followed her guidance, then we wouldn't even be sitting here talking about the families here in the 8th District who can't afford health care, the people who are splitting their pills, the senior citizens who believe, well, either I pay for gas, I pay for the next meal, or I pay for that trip up to see the doctor. There's a lot of serious things happening in this district as a result of not having a universal health care system. We're the richest country in the world, yet people cannot afford to have health care. And that frustrates me, and it frustrates a lot of people here in the 8th District.
You've been a fierce opponent of copper nickel mining in northeast Minnesota. Why is that? Why do you feel so strongly about it?
Well, first I want to say, and a lot of the publicity and a lot of the PR has lumped copper nickel mining with taconite iron ore mining. And you can't lump them together. They're two different animals. Taconite helped us win 2 wars. It built the Iron Range. It provided good paying jobs for a multitude of families. Back in the 1920s, there were 20,000 miners. Today, there are only 4,000 miners through mechanization, modernization. We're still producing the same amount of ore. And I do support that process. I do support the miners. And I do support anything that is going to build up and make sure that that is a success and it will continue to be a success. On the other hand, copper nickel mining, also known as copper nickel sulfide mining, it is risky. It's never been done in water-rich environments without harm to the environment and the people who live nearby. And sure, we're going to be needing copper nickel. Those are important minerals, but we're not there yet. And besides the environmental aspect and the potential to harm downstream, there's also the economic issue. We would be adding another boom and bust economy to a current boom and bust economy, which we have seen time and time again with taconite and iron ore. When I first came to town, 1983, that's when we saw that billboard, Denny, where it said, "The last person out of Duluth, turn out the lights." 10 years prior to that, the steel plant shut down. 2,400 workers were out of a job. 2,400 families were struggling. And I say, look at what we've done here in Duluth. I call it the Duluth miracle. In 35 years, we have switched from that economy to a burgeoning economy of tourism, medical, education, and, well, even beer. So it can be done. And traveling around, I also see it in Ely. They're on the cusp of a major reinvention, Grand Marais as well. And it all goes back to thinking out of the box and looking at those good-paying, long-term sustainable jobs that I know that we can create.
So then what's your stand on right-to-work laws?
Right to work is wrong for Minnesota.
Why?
Why? Because in other states where it has happened, we have seen a drop in wages and workers' rights and workers' safety, and I'm really concerned about that. I'm an ally of unions. I have family that have been union members. My 92-year-old mother retired to Texas. She is living the benefits of a 49ers pension. Unions are essential, and I know that unions have gotten smaller and smaller and smaller. We have to flip the switch on how young people going into the work environment view unions, because I think that they gave us the 40-hour week, they gave us the weekends, they outlawed child labor. Unions are essential.
Immigration has been a big issue nationally. A lot of people on the Democratic side are pushing for the elimination of ICE. Some are even saying no borders. Where do you stand on that?
Well, I'm not going to come out and say eliminate ICE. And we do have to secure our borders, number one. But we have to come together and come up with common sense immigration law. Even our past Republican presidents understood this. Ronald Reagan, he allowed people who had been living in this country without papers, that had been here for 5 years. They were active and involved in their communities, law-abiding people, find a pathway to citizenship. And I think that's something that we need to bring back. Sometimes the old things, old ideas, should be brought back and used. As far as our dreamers, These kids, I truly believe, are just as American as my son and my daughter-in-law. They also need a pathway to citizenship. I was up on the North Shore and I checked into a hotel, and a young lady behind the desk, she had just finished a 15-hour shift. I said, "Why are you working so much?" She said, "Because the work permits we can't get people to work, number one, because we're seasonal. We can't get the locals to work these jobs. We bring in foreign workers. They come, they help us with our summer work, and then they go back to their countries." Well, we need to expand that program because our tourism industry is really struggling finding workers. So there are things that we can do to ensure that our immigration policies are working for everyone.
Another issue you would deal with in Congress is gun control. And with all of the shootings in schools, do we need to change some laws or add new laws?
I believe in common sense gun regulation. First, I'm a gun owner. I have a registered gun. I know that in my heart that the Second Amendment is not going anywhere because, frankly, nobody's going to come and take your gun. Right now, America has 300 million guns in private hands. Can you imagine the size of an army or a police force it would take to go into every home in America to take your guns away? It's not going to happen. But we have to start looking at how we view guns and what we can do to protect our kids in our schools and in people in our public places. So I believe that we should outlaw bump stocks. They are on the way out. High capacity magazines should be banned. I also believe that noise suppressors, actually sound suppressors, silencers, have no place in our society. And military assault style weapons should be in the hands of those who are sworn to protect us and not in the hands of those who want to harm us.
Mm-hmm. Money in politics. We were talking at
Oh
the beginning
my.
at the beginning about all of the ads that are starting to come out at this time. What have you discovered as you've been a candidate, and what's your position?
I think that we really need to come together to get the money out of politics, number one. I have a volunteer-driven campaign, a grassroots campaign, and I just checked my ActBlue account, and our average donation throughout this process has been $92. Some people give me $5, some people give me more, so that works out. 99% of the money that we have collected has come from within the 8th District and has come from friends, people who believe in our message, in our campaign's message. Now we see a lot of PACs in Washington sending in fancy, high gloss mailers into this district. We're seeing a lot of commercials coming into this district for our primary, and they're not associated with any campaign. So what are they trying to convince the voter to do here? And I am a firm believer that we need to get the money out of politics. And I have to say, my neighbor Al has told me a joke, and he says it's the golden rule of politics. The man who holds the gold makes all the rules. That is wrong. And I'm a firm believer that we need to end Citizens United, and we need to work toward a more fair campaign funding system where the average person can say, you know, I have something to give and I want to serve my country. I want to do community service and become a citizen politician. That should be available to all of us, not just the wealthy.
Other Democratic candidates are calling for free college education. Your stand?
Absolutely, absolutely.
How would we pay for it, and how could we afford it?
Well, number one, we have been at war for 17 years, and I always say, do we really need another Trident submarine? We have to start looking at where the money, we have a pie. The pie is shrinking as a result of a recent tax cut to the most wealthy people in this country. So the pie has gotten smaller. So we have to start looking. Do we want to take money out of the military to make sure that our social programs are fully funded to help give a leg up to the people who are truly struggling? Or do we want to continue putting money into the military-industrial complex that Eisenhower warned us about, and it's been here? And I think that there are ways to find the money we need to take care of the people who need taken care of, including our young people. And I say that this is a generation too big to fail. These are the young people that started their lives out at the end of when the banks failed back in 2008. Mm-hmm. And we bailed out the banks. Now these young people are suffering. They're a generation frozen in time. They're not having children. They're not buying homes. They're not buying cars. We need to reach out, help them with their student loans, but we also have to help the other young people coming up. So VOTEX, community colleges, public colleges and universities need to have free tuition.
Well, as they say in TV, it's a wrap.
I'm sorry. It's been
Thank
a
you.
joy.
Thank
you
you,
very
Michelle,
much.
for
Thank
joining
you.
Nice having you here.
Appreciate
Thank you.
it.
For many months, we've been featuring the stories of Vietnam veterans from our region. This week, we have the story of a Hibbing man who went into the military at a very young age and soon found himself fighting in the war-torn country. Here is the first-person account of Kelvin Severson.
I left when I was 17. Finished high school in the Army, and I spent 3.5 years in the Army, and when I got out, I still wasn't old enough to drink. I joined the Army and volunteered for the paratroopers, and that was a very life-defining school, jump school. We started out with like 1,500 guys. 3.5 weeks later, there's 300 left. And then I was assigned to Battery B of the 320th Artillery, and at that time the 101st was being reorganized from 5 battle groups to 3 brigades, and I was in the artillery battalion assigned to the 1st Brigade. We went over on a World War II troop ship, which was an experience, and we disembarked in Cameron Bay, but we disembarked and went on trucks, and they took us up the bay a ways, and we went on landing craft, and then we went up in a little further, and then we had about 1.5 miles, I think, to go to get to our base camp. We got there in July of '65, and we set up our base camp at Van Rang. We got all our trucks and all our guns and all our stuff in, and then it was in, I think, August of '65, we went up into the Central Highlands. And that's where things started. You had to be ready all the time. You know, when they called fire mission, you had to be ready. But I had an easy job. I was unit armor and artillery mechanic. Our battery went into Ankei village on an air assault. We went in on C-130s in a rough runway that probably wasn't more than 1/4 mile long. We went in, we landed, we hung on for dear life. We had our equipment was all tied down in the back, and there was a V-shaped sharp notch on the tie downs, and rather than sit there and you just grabbed a strap and pulled them and it cut all the tie downs. And we were out the back, and he went off the other end of the runway. I don't know how much room he had, but not much. And he got out of there, and we went in there, our artillery battery went in there, and then the infantry came up from down below that pass. And the 502nd took a beating in there. So then that was really as an artillery battery, we had a lot of action. They were World War II era 105 howitzers. They had a range of 13,700 meters, and you basically shot at a spot on the map. Your forward observers would give you a spot on the map, your fire direction control would plot it all out, and you'd shoot at it. And we were very good. We went into this village, Annan village, and the Viet Cong had been in there, and they really beat up on those people. They killed some of their kids. They took their rice, 15 tons of rice. They just took it. And they beat up on it pretty bad. Well, our intelligence found out where they were. Well, there's 18 guns in our artillery battalion, and all 18 guns are airlifted in range of their base camp. And they had a rude awakening. We were bringing ammunition in, and Chinook helicopters, and ammunition, when you take it out of the wooden boxes in a round paper tube, and they'd lay it in the back of the helicopter, strap it down. We'd get in there, lift the straps up, you'd raise the nose of the helicopter and roll them all out the back. And then if everything from there was hand carried. But I think we put, I don't know how many thousands of rounds into that base camp. And we got the rice back. And people were very happy. So they had this parade and very, very appreciative of what we had done. There was a CBS reporter in the area, and he was invited, and the note that came back from him to our battery commander was he had something more important to go to. What could have been more important? But since then, I haven't. This stuff going on now, I'm thinking to myself, what are they not telling us about?
It's time for the business news from the editors at Business North. Nubai Global Investment, majority owner of Mesabi Metallics in Nashwauk, has made it clear it no longer employs Tom Clark as its chief executive. After announcing his release last week, Nubai filed a motion in federal district court seeking to restrain Clark from claiming any affiliation with Mesabi Metallics, which previously operated as SR Steel Minnesota. On Thursday, Nubai said Gary Heasley was named interim CEO. The company said it has invested $250 million into rebuilding the partially constructed SR processing plant, and it intends to keep investing in the Nashwauk plant until it opens.
A valve failed to prevent air from mixing with hydrocarbons back on April 26th, causing the Husky Refinery in Superior to ignite. Well, that's the preliminary finding of the U.S. Chemical Safety and Hazard Investigation Board. It will continue to investigate the incident until a final determination is made, which could take another 2 years. In the meantime, the board released an animated video explaining the cause of the refinery disaster.
April 26, 2018, the Husky Superior Refinery in Superior, Wisconsin. At 5:40 a.m., operators took steps to shut down the refinery's fluid catalytic cracker, or FCC unit, for periodic maintenance and inspection. Within the FCC unit, slide valves control the flow of material between a reactor, which contains flammable hydrocarbons, and a regenerator, which contains air. It is important to prevent mixing the hydrocarbons and air, since if they mix, an explosion can occur. But during the shutdown, conditions existed that could have allowed air from the regenerator to flow backwards through one of the slide valves into the reactor, and then into equipment downstream of the reactor, which contained flammable hydrocarbons. At approximately 10 a.m., there was a large explosion. Debris from the explosion flew about 200 feet and hit a large above-ground storage tank, puncturing the side of the tank and spilling over 15,000 barrels of hot asphalt into the refinery. The released asphalt ignited about 12:15 p.m., creating a massive fire, which burned into the evening. 36 people sought medical attention for injuries, and a large portion of the town of Superior, Wisconsin, was evacuated.
An Iron Range nonprofit company is adding 160 jobs statewide. Minnesota Diversified Industries has offices in Grand Rapids, Cohasset, Hibbing, and Minneapolis. It is hiring material handlers, maintenance and quality technicians, production workers, hand assemblers, a supervisor, and a packaging engineer to work at its facilities. MDI makes custom corrugated plastic containers for the post office and other industries. Its hiring is in response to growing demand for its custom products. It has a goal of creating employment opportunities for individuals who have disabilities. For more on these and other stories, visit businessnorth.com.
If you have a comment on the show, call now. Dial 218-788-2849 to leave a message, or send an email to almanacnorth@wdse.org, and visit the new improved WDSE website for a fresh look at our program schedule, news about your favorite PBS shows, and happenings here at the station. Have you checked out the website, Julie? It's looking better than ever.
I did check out the website today. It's looking fabulous, and congratulations to everybody who's been working really hard to get it up and running.
They
Looks
certainly
great.
have, right. We're going to leave you now with a dose of dance from the end of the road in Ely.
This is about just, being inspired by water and noticing, hey, it's all around us all the time, and we take it for granted, honestly. I'm Molly Olson, and the show is called Reflections on Water. The way that water is in every religion, it's spiritual for so many people. And so that's what it's about more for me, and about the abstractness of it.
The show is a collaboration between community musicians, dancers, and singers. It marks the premiere of an original composition created by Michael Mayo-Rana for an Ely trio called the Accidental Ensemble. Reflections on Water has one more performance Saturday night at the Vermilion Community College in Ely. And with that, for Julie and the crew here at WDSE, I'm Dennis Anderson. Have a great weekend. Good night, everybody, and be kind.